My cousin Carol often remarked that her house possessed a character all its own, not in a frightening, ghostly sense, but rather in a way that feels familiar, a touch disordered, and ultimately reassuring. The house exuded a welcoming charm, inviting you to shed your shoes, settle into a well-worn plush armchair, and simply inhale the comfort of the moment. That is precisely what I required. At 52, life had presented me with its fair share of unexpected challenges. A divorce that unfolded with a surprising degree of civility, yet still cast a lingering emptiness as the children, now grown, took flight from the nest, leaving an unsettling void behind silent. As soon as Carol extended her invitation for a weekend stay while she and her husband Robert embarked on a charming anniversary getaway, I swiftly packed my overnight bag, barely allowing her to complete her sentence. The house sat comfortably among the trees on a serene street, in a section of town that seemed to belong to a different realms than my own pristine suburban cul-de-sac. The atmosphere here felt distinct, laden with the fragrance of blossoming jasmine and the crispness of freshly mown grass. Within the space, the comforting, joyful disarray of Carol's existence welcomed me as if we were long-lost companions. Pictures elegantly displayed of her two sons, from gap-toothed smiles to college graduations, the hallway is adorned. Her youngest, Ethan, remained in college, a detail that consistently stirred a twinge of envy within me for the vibrant life that continued to swirl around her. My home resembled a museum, a testament to a life that had once flourished within its walls. The initial evening unfolded in a serene embrace of solitude. As I wandered through Carol's garden, a vibrant tapestry of blossoms and unruly herbs, I eventually found my way to the porch swing, where I nestled in with a glass of chilled tea and a book that had long awaited my attention. The sun sank beneath the horizon, casting a vibrant palette across the sky was painted in shades of orange and purple, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, a profound sense of peace enveloped me. Carol had left a lasagna in the fridge, and I found myself devouring it at the kitchen counter, experiencing an odd sense of liberation in the uncomplicated choice of foregoing a table for one. Later, ensconced in a warm afghan on the sofa, as I turned the pages of faded photo albums, I embarked on a wistful journey through the memories of our intertwined childhoods. Silence enveloped the house. The only sounds were the soft hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the old floorboards. The silence enveloped me like a warm embrace, a stark contrast to the hollow quiet I had grown accustomed to. A wave of gratitude washed over me for Carol and the small sanctuary she had provided. At last, I found myself in the guest room, a snug haven tucked away at the rear of the house, offering a serene view of the garden. The bed was draped in a meticulously crafted quilt, while the fragrance of lavender lingered softly in the atmosphere. As I surrendered to slumber, a sense of ease enveloped me, the soft serenade of crickets outside my window guiding me into a peaceful rest, a welcome reprieve after months of restless nights. It was surely well beyond the witching hour when I was roused from my slumber. It was not a cacophony and understated change in the ambience of the home. A gentle thump echoed from below, accompanied by the subtle sound of a door clicking shut. Immediately, my mind drifted to Carol and Robert. It is possible they returned sooner than expected. Yet, I soon detected the sound of footsteps ascending the stairs, deliberate and unhurried. Not the swift pace of an individual making their way back home. A shiver of apprehension coursed through my being. In the end, solitude enveloped the house, leaving me as its sole occupant. I propped myself up in bed, feeling my heart race with a heightened rhythm. The footsteps came to a halt just beyond my door. I paused, my breath caught, my ears attuned to the silence that enveloped me. Subsequently, the doorknob started to rotate gradually, as if unsure of its purpose. My thoughts surged through a whirlwind of frantic possibilities. A trespasser, a nearby resident in distress. The door groaned as it swung open, revealing a tall figure that loomed in the doorway, illuminated only by the faint glow of the hallway light behind it. My breath caught in my throat. He stood tall, significantly taller than the image etched in my memory from the Christmas card photos. The gentle illumination from the hallway enveloped his face in a play of shadows, yet I discerned the recognizable dark curls and the firm line of his jaw, reminiscent of his father's features. He hadn't noticed me yet, his eyes fixed on the ground, as though he were striving to remain as silent as possible. He stepped into the room with a hint of hesitation, and I noticed the duffel bag he carried with him. In that moment, it dawned on me that he had returned from college for the weekend, blissfully ignorant of the fact that his parents' guest room was already taken. My initial fear transformed into a surge of an indescribable sensation, elusive and unfamiliar. It was an unusual blend of astonishment and an immediate, sharp consciousness of my own existence in this cozy familial haven. At last, he lifted his gaze, and our eyes locked in the shadows of the softly illuminated room. I observed the sudden spark of recognition in his eyes, quickly accompanied by a wave of embarrassment that even the shadows failed to conceal. "Aunt Catherine," he murmured, his voice a rich, husky timbre that resonated deeper than I had anticipated. "What brings you to this place?" I discovered my own voice, somewhat unsteady in the beginning. "Ethan, you nearly gave me a heart attack." I aimed for a playful tone, yet my heart continued to flutter softly against my ribs. A gradual smile unfurled upon his visage. He wore a charming lopsided grin that instantly brought to mind a much younger Ethan, the boy who used to trail behind me like a shadow at family gatherings. "I deeply apologize," he murmured, retreating slightly as if to grant me some distance. "I had no idea anyone was around. My parents didn't mention it. They took off on a little getaway," I said, tugging the quilt up a bit more. "I'm merely house-sitting for the weekend." He nodded, remaining in the doorway, a portrait of youthful vitality even in his quietude. He donned a modest in his t-shirt and jeans. I was taken aback by the extent of his transformation into adulthood. The slender youth from my recollections had transformed into a young man, his broad shoulders and understated confidence marking a striking evolution. "Well," he remarked, a trace of humor lacing his words, "this is a bit awkward." A genuine, warm laugh escaped him, cutting through the tension that hung in the air. He adjusted his stance, and the duffel bag he clutched thudded gently against the doorframe. "I was just planning to crash here for the night. I've gotten early." The situation. I had class on Monday, and the thought of driving back tomorrow felt burdensome. Naturally, I acquiesced without hesitation. "After all, this was your room." I began to swing my legs out of bed, suggesting I could take the sofa. But he immediately protested, stepping further into the room. "Don't be silly," he insisted. "I can take the sofa. I've slept on it a million times." We lingered in that moment, caught in an unusual standoff in the stillness of the night. The atmosphere was thick with an unspoken politeness, a mutual acknowledgement of the unexpected turn of events, the situation. Yet beneath the surface, I sensed something deeper, a connection, a spark of the familiar intertwined with the novel. It was in the way he regarded me, not merely as his aunt, but as a person, a woman. In that fleeting moment, I glimpsed my younger self mirrored in his gaze, a poignant reminder of a time when life brimmed with possibilities. I proposed, a sudden idea taking shape in my mind. "The bed's spacious enough for two, provided you don't snore." A boyish grin broke across his face, illuminating the room. "Deal. But I know promises could be made." He let his duffel bag fall to the floor near the door and made his way to the other side of the bed. As he settled down, the mattress shifted beneath him, and I became acutely aware of how close he was. The air was infused with his scent, a clean, masculine aroma of soap mingled with something distinctly his. I adjusted myself, creating space for him, my heart performing a little dance that had nothing to do with fear anymore. He was merely a boy, I reminded myself, my cousin's son. Yet in the hushed intimacy of that moonlit room, he embodied something greater, a life still in the process of unfolding, a narrative just taking shape. For a fleeting moment, I felt intertwined with that journey. He nestled into the bed next to me, and the air between us crackled with an unspoken energy. It wasn't awkward. Rather, it was a palpable recognition of another's presence, a sensation I hadn't felt in ages. We lay there for a few moments, gazing at the ceiling, the only sounds being the soft murmur of the house and our quiet breaths. He spoke, his voice a soft whisper in the shadows. "How have you been, Aunt Catherine?" "Is that so?" The question lingered, both simple and profound. It transcended the polite, surface-level inquiry of "How are you?" to which I was accustomed. His tone carried a genuine curiosity, a depth that caught me off guard. I shifted on the pillow to meet his gaze. In the soft light streaming through the window, I could discern the sincerity etched on his face. "I've been okay," I confessed, the word feeling woefully insufficient. "Life has been somewhat tranquil of late." He nodded, a contemplative gaze in his eyes. "My mother shared the news of the divorce with me." "I'm sorry." "It was for the best," I said, and to my surprise, the words resonated with a certain truth. "We just grew apart, you know." "I think so," he replied, his gaze drifting into the distance for a fleeting moment. I often observe this with my friends' parents. It's as if they inhabit the same space yet exist in entirely separate realms. His unexpected insight took me aback. Though young, he possessed a wisdom beyond his years. We conversed for what felt like hours, our voices mere whispers against the backdrop of the night. Classes, his fervor for photography, and his aspirations of exploring the globe. I discovered myself revealing thoughts to him that I had never shared with anyone else, not even Carol. I confided in him about the void in my home, the sense of being adrift now that my identity as a mother had transformed. He listened with unwavering patience, his presence a reassuring anchor amidst the shadows. There was no trace of judgment in his gaze, only a gentle understanding that calmed a part of my spirit I hadn't realized was in distress. He recounted his own amidst the uncertainties, the weight of expectation to have everything sorted, and the looming dread of missteps. A connection blossomed between us. An invisible thread wove our lives together, despite the divergent paths we walked. In a moment that felt both fleeting and profound, his hand brushed against mine, a simple yet electrifying gesture that ignited a warmth within me. His fingers, long and cool, intertwined with mine effortlessly. It wasn't a gesture steeped in romance, yet it carried a profound intimacy, a quiet recognition of our shared experience, of the bond we had crafted in the stillness of the night. In that moment, I understood that this unforeseen meeting was not merely an uncomfortable twist of fate. It was a treasure, a testament that life still had its share of surprises, that fresh connections could blossom in the most unexpected corners. It was a soft whisper from the cosmos, assuring me that my narrative was far from complete, that there were still pages waiting to be filled. As the initial blush of dawn began to brighten the horizon, our dialogue faded into a serene quietude. He remained holding my hand, his thumb softly caressing the back of mine. A deep sense of tranquility washed over me, a fulfillment that had eluded my life for far too long. "You know," he murmured, his voice heavy with slumber. "You're not just my aunt, Catherine. You're a really cool person." A smile graced my lips. "You're not so bad yourself, Ethan." He gave my hand a gentle squeeze before turning onto his side, his back now facing me. I observed the subtle rise and fall of his shoulders as he surrendered to sleep. I lingered awake a bit longer, the first rays of the morning sun casting a golden glow into the room. A sense of renewal washed over me, a quiet joy that felt both new and familiar. The night had begun with an unexpected intrusion, a moment steeped in fear and uncertainty, yet it had transformed into something beautiful, something I knew I would hold dear for a long time. It served as a reminder that even in the quietest corners of our lives, the most profound connections can emerge, and that sometimes the most unexpected detours guide us precisely where we need to go. I closed my eyes, a genuine smile graced my lips. For the first time in what felt like ages, I found myself anticipating the day ahead. I awoke to the inviting aroma of coffee, not the instant variety I usually brewed at home, but the deep, rich scent of freshly ground beans. The other side of the bed lay empty, the sheets cool beneath my fingertips. For a fleeting moment, I questioned whether it had all been a dream. The quiet conversation, the shared vulnerability, the soft brush of his hand against mine. But then my gaze fell upon his duffel bag, still resting by the door, and a small folded note on the bedside table. I picked it up, my heart fluttering slightly. The handwriting was a vibrant, youthful scrawl brimming with energy and personality. It was from Aunt Catherine, and it simply stated, "Went for a run. The coffee brews gently on the stove. Take what you need. It was truly delightful to converse with you last night, Ethan." A smile blossomed on my face. It felt genuine. All of it. I rose from my bed, feeling more buoyant than I had in years. I donned my robe and made my way downstairs to the kitchen. The house was bathed in the soft glow of morning light, and the scent of coffee wafted through the air, even more pronounced. Here I stood, a pot brewing on the counter, a pristine mug awaiting my touch. I poured myself a cup, savoring the rich, dark liquid that offered a welcome jolt to my senses. Leaning against the counter, I gazed out the kitchen window, taking in the vibrant green of Carol's garden. The world felt a touch brighter this morning, infused with a sense of promise. The front door creaked open and shut, footsteps echoing in the air. Moments later, Ethan appeared in the kitchen doorway, his face flushed from his run, a light sheen of exertion glistening on his skin. Beads of sweat glistened on his brow. Clad in shorts and a t-shirt, he appeared even more vibrant and full of life under the daylight. "Morning," he greeted, his voice still tinged with breathlessness. That same lopsided grin, which had captivated me the night before, spread across his face. "Morning," I responded, my tone infused with warmth. "Thanks for the coffee. It is utterly delightful." "No problem," he replied, reaching for a glass in the cupboard and filling it with water from the tap. He swallowed it in a single, swift motion, his Adam's apple rising and falling with the effort. We found ourselves in a cozy pause in the stillness. The effortless bond from the night before still hangs in the air between us. In the serene embrace of the morning kitchen, it felt instinctive to be here with him. It resonated with the warmth of familiarity. Not merely the hollow facade of a dwelling I once inhabited, but a genuine sanctuary brimming with vitality, warmth, and the hopeful anticipation of a fresh dawn. He leaned against the opposite counter as he spoke. "What do you have in store for today? Please, feel free to continue without me hindering your path. I find myself without any plans at the moment." I confessed that my plan was simply to immerse myself in a book and unwind. "That sounds lovely," he remarked. "However, it does seem somewhat dull, doesn't it? Consider?" I arched an eyebrow. "What would you recommend?" "A sage individual." He let out a hearty laugh, a warm, resonant sound that enveloped the kitchen. "Well," he said, a playful sparkle dancing in his eyes. I found myself contemplating a drive. A quaint little town lies up the coast, just an hour's drive from here. The establishment boasts a charming diner, renowned for serving the most exquisite milkshakes you could ever imagine. He halted, his eyes locking onto mine. "Would you care to join me?" The invitation lingered, suspended in the atmosphere. An illuminating, unforeseen opportunity amidst the tranquility of my serene weekend. A fragment of my being, the rational 52-year-old individual, inclined to decline. It was excessively impulsive, strikingly out of character. Yet, a different facet of my being, one that had long lain in slumber, ached for an adventure, however modest it might be. "I'm not quite sure," I replied, a hint of uncertainty in my voice. "Come on," he urged, his voice soft and soothing. "It promises to be an enjoyable experience. We can engage in further conversation. I long to immerse myself in more of your tales." In an instant, I found myself captivated. The idea of passing the day in his company, of prolonging our dialogue, of merely existing in his lively presence was irresistibly alluring. Withstand. Very well, I replied, a grin blossoming on my lips. Game on. However, it is you who will be purchasing the milkshakes. Deal, he said, a broader grin spreading across his face. The day unfolded in ways I had only dreamed of, surpassing all my expectations. With the windows rolled down, we cruised along, the wind tousling our hair as we belted out tunes from the classic rock station playing on the radio. He navigated the roads with skill, exuding a calm assurance that put me at total ease. We engaged in conversation and shared laughter, the dialogue unfolding as effortlessly as it had the previous evening. He shared with me the depths of his photography, his fervor for seizing moments, the elegance found within the mundane instances of life. I discovered that I was sharing with him the dreams I had long neglected, the aspirations I had put on hold to embrace the roles of a mother and a partner. The small town exuded a charm that matched his vivid descriptions, adorned with its delightful shops and warm, welcoming faces. We enjoyed our lunch at the diner, where the milkshakes were truly the finest I had ever savored. As we strolled along the shoreline, the waves thundered against the sand, and the bracing scent of salt filled the air. He captured images of it all, the way the light danced upon the water, the intricate patterns in the grains of sand, the creases of joy etched around my eyes, and the way he gazed at me through the viewfinder of his camera. I perceived myself from a fresh perspective, not as a middle-aged woman whose best years had faded into the past, but as a vibrant soul, a woman brimming with life, a woman whose narrative was rich and deserving of being shared. As we journeyed home in the waning light of the day, the sun stretched its golden rays, creating elongated shadows that danced along the pavement, while a soothing silence enveloped us. The silence enveloped them, rich with a mutual understanding, a profound and unvoiced bond that lingered in the air. I experienced a depth of gratitude that was nearly moved me to tears. This weekend, which began as a mere getaway from my tranquil existence, evolved into something far more profound. The experience unfolded as a profound exploration of the self, illuminating the joy and beauty that often lie hidden in the most surprising corners of life. It was entirely due to the boy beside me, the one with the ancient wisdom in his eyes and the crooked smile, who had entered my life in the most unforeseen manner. Upon our return to the house, the sun dipped low on the horizon, casting the sky in a breathtaking tapestry of fiery oranges and deep reds. We stood on the porch for a moment, observing the colors diminish, neither of us eager for the day to conclude. "Thank you, Ethan," I murmured, my voice barely above a whisper. "For today, for everything." He faced me, his demeanor grave. "I appreciate it, and you too, Catherine," he remarked. I truly needed this. And in that instant, clarity washed over me. In our individual wanderings, we had both felt a sense of disorientation, yet in discovering one another, we unearthed fragments of our own identities. The weekend was drawing to a close, yet I felt certain that the bond we had forged would endure through the years. It was a connection crafted in the serene closeness of the night, a connection rooted in mutual respect and a collective voyage of self-discovery. As I lingered in that moment, observing the final whispers of sunlight slipping beneath the horizon, a profound realization washed over me. My own narrative was just beginning. Indeed, it seemed as though it was merely